The lecture hall on Station Kepler-Nine smelled like ozone and recycled air, a combination that Captain Mara Chen had grown to tolerate over her 3 months at the Galactic Military Academy. She sat in the back row, arms crossed, watching Professor Vextar drone on about conventional siege warfare with all the enthusiasm of a funeral director reading tax codes. And thus, the Krelak directive demands a minimum orbital bombardment radius of 12 kilometers before ground deployment. The insectoid professor clicked, his mandibles working in that way that made half the class look nauseous. Mara yawned. Big mistake. Captain Chen. The professor's compound eyes swiveled toward her with unsettling precision. Perhaps you find the deaths of 40,000 Krell soldiers boring. No, sir. She straightened slightly, her tone perfectly neutral. I find your solution boring. A ripple of shock went through the 70-odd cadets packed into the amphitheater. Nobody talked back to Vextar. The former general had commanded fleets that cracked planets. He'd turned entire species into historical footnotes. Elaborate. One word. Clipped. Dangerous. Mara stood, her boots clicking against the metal flooring. At 5'6", she was one of the smallest beings in the room, surrounded by thoraxians built like tanks, Valkyrie with their serpentine grace, and a dozen other species that made humanity look fragile by comparison. You used orbital bombardment to soften defenses before landing troops, she said. Textbook. Safe. It also gave the defenders exactly 12 minutes to relocate their command structure, redistribute forces, and prepare countermeasures. You announced your attack before you made it. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign his translator implant recognized as irritation. The alternative being, don't knock on the door before you kick it in. Several cadets laughed. A thoraxian named Grotech, built like a walking boulder with anger issues, turned to glare at her. Stealth insertion is impossible against hardened positions, Vextar said. The Krell defenders had sensor arrays covering every approach vector. Had being the operative word, Mara replied. Because you destroyed them with your orbital bombardment. Before that, they were looking for ships, not people. You suggest teleportation. The professor's tone dripped with sarcasm. Perhaps your species has developed magic alongside your primitive combustion weapons? More laughter. Mara didn't smile. I suggest you actually read the human tactical database your academy supposedly integrated 6 months ago. She pulled up her datapad, fingers dancing across the haptic interface. Specifically Battle of Kandahar, Earth year 2001, Taliban fighters held a mountain fortress. Coalition forces could have bombed it flat, but hostages complicated that option. So instead a 12-person team inserted via high-altitude low-opening jump, neutralized sentries using suppressed weapons, and extracted the hostages before the main force even arrived. We are discussing planetary warfare, not your species' tribal conflicts, Vextar said. Scale it up then. Mara was warming to her subject now. Your sensor arrays were looking for ships because ships are what you always use. Drop troops from high orbit in individual pods small enough to read as debris. No energy signatures, no formation, just 70-odd specks of metal scattering on atmospheric entry. By the time they hit ground, your command structure is already compromised, your communications are severed, and your troops are fighting ghosts in their own hallways. The lecture hall had gone completely silent. Your casualties would be catastrophic, Vextar said, but his tone had shifted. He was actually considering it. Potentially, Mara admitted, but you spent 40,000 soldiers on a battle you won by default because you had more bodies than they had ammunition. I'm suggesting you spend 40 specialists and win before they know there's a fight. A soft chime interrupted them. Then another. Then a dozen more in rapid succession as every cadet's emergency beacon activated simultaneously. Professor Vextar's exoskeleton went rigid. Everyone remained calm and proceed to designated shelter points. What's happening? Someone asked. The answer came not from Vextar but from the station-wide alert system, a synthetic voice that somehow managed to sound both clinical and terrified. Hostile fleet detected. Multiple capital ships. Transferring tactical data now. Holographic displays erupted throughout the lecture hall, showing the space around Station Kepler-Nine. Mara felt her stomach drop. 27 warships had just appeared at the system's edge, their profiles matching nothing in the known database. They were enormous, each one easily 3 times the size of the Academy's defensive frigates, and they were accelerating. Thraxi, Vextar whispered, which was impressive since he didn't actually have vocal cords. His translator just knew how to convey existential dread. They're supposed to be extinct. Well, they're doing a terrible job of it, Mara muttered. The professor spun toward her. Captain Chen, you will follow evacuation protocols immediately. Sir, with respect, we're a military academy. We have 300 cadets from 40 species, most of us with actual combat experience. We should be arming up, not running away. The Thoraxi harvested 18 civilizations before the Concord Wars ended them, Vexes said. Ended them poorly, apparently. They don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They consume. The deck shuddered beneath their feet. Outside the reinforced windows, space lit up with weapon fire. The Academy's defense platforms were engaging, their particle beams lancing out toward the approaching armada. It looked impressive right up until return fire vaporized 3 platforms in quick succession. Evacuation pods are launching, someone shouted. Mara pulled up her tactical display, her mind racing through options. The Thoraxi fleet was spreading out, forming an envelopment pattern that would cut off escape routes within minutes. They weren't just attacking, they were hunting. They're targeting the pods, she said, watching in horror as energy weapons reached out like luminous fingers, swatting aside the fleeing vessels. They're picking off anyone who runs. Galactic stood, his massive frame blocking half the room. Then we fight. With what? Another cadet demanded. We're students, not soldiers. Sick for yourself, Mara said. She turned to Vexfar. Sir, the Armory, you have access codes. The professor's mandibles worked soundlessly for a moment. Outside, another evacuation pod became an expanding cloud of vapor and screaming metal. Deck 7, he said finally. Authorization Vexthar Gamma 9. Take what you need. He paused, his compound eyes fixing on Mara with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. I taught warfare for 60 years. I've seen thousands of your tactical scenarios, Captain Chen. Now show me if humans actually practice what you preach. Mara didn't waste time with acknowledgement. She was already moving, her emergency beacon pinging the cadet network with a simple message. Armory. Deck 7. Now, 43 cadets followed her out of the lecture hall. The rest scattered toward shelters, their training overriding whatever courage they might have possessed. Mara didn't judge them. Fear was rational. What she was doing was categorically insane. The corridors shook with impact tremors as they ran. Emergency lighting painted everything in shades of amber and shadow. Twice they had to detour around collapsed bulkheads. Once they passed a viewport where a Thoraxi boarding pod was attaching itself to the station's hull like a mechanical parasite. How long until they breach? Asked Senna, a Velkari girl who'd bunked next to Mara for the past month. Minutes, maybe less. Mara didn't slow down. Bakstar said they consume, not occupy. That means they'll flood the station with troops, kill everything that moves, and strip any technology worth taking. Cheerful, Senna hissed. They reached the armory to find the doors already open, Vexthar's authorization having unlocked every security measure. Inside, racks of weapons gleamed under sterile lighting. Plasma rifles, kinetic accelerators, enough firepower to outfit a small army. Galactic reached for a massive rotary cannon that probably weighed more than Mara's entire body. No, she said. The Thoraxian paused. Excuse me? That thing fires 8,000 rounds per minute. You'll burn through your ammunition in 30 seconds and alert every hostile within 500 meters. She grabbed a pulse rifle instead, checking its charge. We're not here to make noise. We're here to survive long enough to turn this situation around. Turn it around how exactly? Senna asked, already arming herself with practiced efficiency. In case you missed it, there's a hostile fleet outside and we're students armed with training weapons. Mara smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it. I just gave a lecture on unconventional warfare. Time to field test the material. She moved to an equipment locker and started pulling out gear. Senna, you're good with electronics. I need you finding access to station systems. Life support, doors, anything we can weaponize. Grotech, take 5 of your people and secure this section. Anyone who isn't us doesn't get through. The rest of you, grab rifles and follow me. Where? Someone asked. To introduce ourselves to our guests. The station rocked again. Harder this time. Atmospheric warnings shrieked as hull breaches multiplied. Through the armory's external feed, Mara watched Thoraxi soldiers pour out of their boarding pods. They were nightmares made flesh. all chitinous armor and too many limbs, moving with the fluid coordination of a hive mind. And they were heading straight for the student quarters. "Move," Mara said. They moved. The first contact happened in Junction 12, a maintenance corridor that connected the main habitat ring to the station's spine. Mara had positioned her team in a crossfire pattern, using the corridor's support struts for cover. When the Thoraxi squad rounded the corner, they walked into a killing box. Pulse rifles cracked. Psyche bodies jerked and fell, their organic armor no match for concentrated fire at close range. It was over in seconds. "Check them," Mara ordered, already scanning for reinforcements. One of the cadets, a human named Torres, knelt beside a fallen Thraxi. "They're not carrying anything, no weapons, no equipment, just biological weapons built into their bodies, because they don't need anything else," Mara said. "They're the weapons." She triggered her comm Senna status. "I'm in," the Velkari responded. "Station systems are a mess, but I've got partial access, life support, internal sensors, door controls. What do you need? Can you track Thoraxi movements?" A pause. "Yeah, their biosignatures are showing up clear as day." "Mara, there's hundreds of them. They're spreading through the station like a virus. Where's the heaviest concentration?" "Command deck. They hit it first and hard. Everyone up there is probably dead." Mira's jaw tightened. Command meant Admiral Krell and his staff. It meant the people who actually knew how to coordinate a defense. It meant the station was functionally headless. "What about the reactor?" she asked. "Engineering is still secure," Senna said. "The chief locked it down when the attack started. But it's only a matter of time before they breach it. Don't let them." Mara switched frequencies. "Grultak, fall back to engineering. If those things get to the reactor, we're all vapor." "Understood." "What are you doing?" "Something stupid." She cut the connection before he could argue, and turned to her team. 14 cadets, most of them looking at her like she might actually have a plan. "We're going to command," she said. Torres blinked. "That's suicide." Senna just said it's crawling with them. "Exactly. Which means that's where their leadership is." Mara ejected her rifle's power cell, checked the charge, and slammed it back home. "You cut off the head, the body dies, or at least gets confused long enough for us to exploit." "The Thoraxi use hive communication," someone pointed out. "They don't have traditional command structures." "Everything has command structures," Mara said. "Even hives need nodes, relays, something coordinating the swarm. We find it, we kill it, and suddenly their perfect coordination falls apart." She started moving before anyone could debate further. Behind her she heard Torres mutter something that sounded like a prayer in 6 different languages. The road to command took them through sections of the station that felt like war zones. Bodies everywhere, some in uniform, some civilian. The Thoraxi had been thorough and brutal. Mara forced herself not to look too closely, to not think about the fact that these were people she'd passed in hallways and shared meals with. Focus. Survive. Win. They were 3 junctions from command when Senna's voice crackled in her ear. "Mara, I'm reading a massive biosignature in the command center, way bigger than the others. I think it's their node. Can you get me internal schematics?" "Sending now." Holographic blueprints appeared on Mara's heads-up display. The command center was a circular room with a central control platform surrounded by workstations, multiple entry points, but all of them funneled into narrow access corridors. Defensible if you were inside, a nightmare if you were trying to breach. "There," she said, highlighting a maintenance shaft. "It bypasses the main approaches, drops us directly into the command level right behind their position." "That shaft is barely wide enough for a single person," Torres said. "Then we go single file." Mara found the access panel and pried it open. Inside, darkness stretched upward at a steep angle. "I'll go first. Follow my lead, stay quiet, and when we drop into that room, shoot anything that isn't us." She didn't wait for agreement. Couldn't afford to. The moment you gave people time to think about how insane a plan was, they started finding reasons not to follow it. The shaft was claustrophobic and dark, lit only by the pale glow of her rifle's optics. Mara climbed, her muscles burning, her breath loud in her own ears. Below her she could hear the others following, their movement echoing softly in the confined space. It took 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours. When she reached the top, a grate blocked her path. Through the perforations, she could see the command center. It was full of Thoraxi. And in the center, towering over the others, was something that made the regular soldiers look like insects by comparison. It stood nearly 12 feet tall, its body a grotesque fusion of organic and technological components. Cables ran from its skull into the station's systems, pulsing with sickly light. The node. Mara triggered her calm voice, barely a whisper. On my mark, blow the grate and light them up. No hesitation, no mercy. She counted down from 3 in her head. At 0, she triggered a shaped charge sheet attached to the grate's frame. The explosion was small but effective, blowing the grate inward and filling the command center with smoke and chaos. Mara dropped through the opening, rifle already tracking targets. Around her, her team followed, their weapons adding to the symphony of destruction. The Thoraxi reacted with inhuman speed, but they'd been caught completely off guard. Half of them died before they could even turn. The others scrambled for cover, their coordination visibly degrading as panic overrode programming. The node shrieked, a sound that bypassed Mara's ears and went straight to her brain. It ripped free of the cables connecting it to the station, its massive body moving with terrible grace. One arm swept out, catching a cadet and sending him flying into a bulkhead with bone-breaking force. Mara aimed for the node's head and fired. The pulse blast hit center mass, burning through organic armor. The node staggered but didn't fall. Concentrate fire, she shouted. 14 rifles spoke as one. The node's body jerked and spanned, portions of it liquefying under the sustained barrage. It took 3 full seconds of continuous fire before it finally collapsed, its death throes shattering 2 control consoles and cracking the deck plating. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of electrical fires and heavy breathing. Senna, Mara gasped. Tell me that worked. Reading disruption across the Thoraxi network, the Valkyrie responded. Their coordination is falling apart. Ships are breaking formation, ground forces are losing cohesion. Good. Mara moved to the command consoles, her hands flying over controls. Now let's make sure they don't recover. She pulled up the station's defensive systems. Most of the platforms were destroyed, but the station itself had weapon batteries built into its superstructure. Military academies weren't supposed to need them, but apparently someone had planned for the worst. Mara activated every battery simultaneously, overriding safety protocols and power distribution limits. The station groaned as massive capacitors discharged, feeding energy into weapons that hadn't been fired in decades. Through the command center's windows, space lit up. The Thoraxi fleet, already reeling from the loss of coordination, found itself under fire from an enemy that shouldn't have been able to fight back. 3 ships died in the first salvo, 5 more in the second. The remaining vessels broke off, their retreat pattern chaotic and desperate. They're running, Torres whispered. Let them, Mara said. She felt exhausted down to her bones. Senna, can you get a message to Galactic Command? Already done. Help's on the way. Mara nodded and allowed herself to sink into a chair. Around her, the command center was a wreck. Bodies everywhere, both Thoraxi and cadet. The cost had been brutal, but they'd won. Torres approached, his expression unreadable. Captain Chen, what you did today. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the craziest, probably both, Mara admitted. The professor was right, though. You practice what you preach. She managed a tired smile. Survival isn't about following the rules. It's about rewriting them. Footsteps echoed from one of the entry corridors. Mara's hand went to her rifle before she recognized Groltak's massive frame. Engineering is secure. The Thoraxian rumbled. Though I suspect you already knew that. Lucky guess. He studied her for a long moment. You know what they're going to say about this, don't you? The human who saved Kepler-9 using tactics nobody else would have tried. Let them say whatever they want, Mara replied. I'm just glad we lived long enough to hear it. In the distance, emergency klaxons finally began to quiet. The immediate crisis was over. Now came the hard part, counting the dead, repairing the damage, and figuring out how an extinct species had just attacked the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. But those were problems for tomorrow. Right now, Mara just wanted to close her eyes and pretend for a few precious moments that the universe made sense. It was only when the Galactic Command fleet arrived 6 hours later that they discovered the truth. The Thoraxi hadn't attacked Kepler-9 because it was a military academy. They'd attacked because Mara Chen was there. And that revelation changed everything. The interrogation room on the Galactic Command Dreadnought Resolute was designed to be intimidating. Bare metal walls, harsh lighting, a single table with 2 chairs. Mara sat on one side, Admiral Krell on the other. The Theronian looked like he'd aged a decade in the 6 hours since the attack. "Walk me through it again," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been asking the same question too many times. "Why would the Theraxi specifically target you?" "I don't know," Mara replied for the 5th time. "Until yesterday, I thought they were extinct. They were extinct." Krell pulled up a holographic display, images flickering in the air between them. The Concord Wars ended them 200 years ago. Their homeworld was sterilized. Their fleet scattered and destroyed. There shouldn't be enough of them left to crew a single ship, let alone 27. Yet here we are. The Admiral's expression darkened. Yes, here we are, with 78 dead cadets, a station that'll take months to repair, and intelligence suggesting that fleet wasn't their only asset. He leaned forward. "Captain Chen, you need to tell me everything about your family, your history, anything that might explain why an extinct species would resurface specifically to kill you." Mara's jaw tightened. "My parents died when I was 12, shuttle accident in the Centauri sector. I grew up in military academies. There's nothing special about my bloodline, except you're human." A new voice, crisp and cold. Mara turned to see a woman entering the room, her uniform marking her as Intelligence Division. "And humans have a unique history with the Theraxi." "Commander Vale," Krell said, clearly not pleased by the interruption. "I wasn't informed you'd be joining us." "Need to know, Admiral." Vale took a position leaning against the wall, her eyes never leaving Mara. "Captain Chen, how much do you know about the real reason humanity joined the Galactic Concord?" "We passed the technological threshold, developed FTL, met the criteria. That's the official story." Vale's smile was thin and sharp. "The truth is messier. Humanity encountered the Theraxi 60 years before first contact with the Concord. They came to Earth like they came to every world, harvest the resources, consume the population, move on. Your species shouldn't have survived." Mara felt something cold settling in her stomach. "But we did. Not just survived. You won." Vale brought up a new display showing a star map with a highlighted system. "The Battle of Wolf 359. Human forces, outgunned and outnumbered, destroyed an entire Theraxi harvesting fleet. It was the first time anyone had beaten them in open combat. It's also what drew the Concord's attention." "I've never heard of Wolf 359, Mara said. "Because your government buried it. Made a deal with the Concord, joined the Alliance, gained protection and technology, but never speak about humanity's previous war. The Concord was already fighting the Theraxi and losing. They couldn't afford for member species to know that a pre-FTL civilization had succeeded where they'd failed." Krell's expression suggested this was news to him too. "If this is accurate, why reveal it now?" "Because the Theraxi just revealed it for us." Vale turned to Mara. "Your parents didn't die in a shuttle accident, Captain. They were researchers studying recovered Theraxi technology from Wolf 359. Their deaths weren't an accident. They were assassinated to prevent their work from being completed." The room seemed to tilt. Mara gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "You're lying." "I wish I was. Your mother, Dr. Mara Chen, had decoded the Theraxi communication protocols. Your father, Commander James Chen, had reverse-engineered their coordination algorithms. Together they'd created a weapon that could theoretically shut down an entire Theraxi fleet by disrupting their hive network." Vale paused. "You inherited their research. It's locked in your genetic markers, encrypted in your DNA as a fail-safe." "That's insane," Mara said, but even as she spoke, pieces were clicking into place. The way her parents had always kept her isolated, the genetic screenings they'd insisted on, the night terrors she'd had as a child, full of images she couldn't possibly have known. Memories that weren't hers. "The Theraxi didn't attack Kepler-9 to destroy a military academy," Vale continued. "They attacked to eliminate you before you could unlock what's buried in your DNA, before you could become the weapon your parents designed." Admiral Krell looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. "This is beyond my jurisdiction. I'm contacting Central Command." "Don't bother," Vale said. "They already know. Why do you think I'm here?" She turned back to Mara. "Captain Chen, you have a choice. Walk away, go back to being a student, and spend the rest of your life running from an enemy that will never stop hunting you. Or let us activate your parents' legacy and finish what they started." Mara's mind raced. Part of her wanted to reject everything she was hearing, to call it an elaborate lie, but another part, deeper and colder, recognized the truth. All those nights studying tactics that seemed to come too easily, the instincts in combat that felt like muscle memory from battles she'd never fought. What exactly would activation entail? She asked, quietly. Veil exchanged a glance with Krell. The research is stored in dormant neural pathways. Activating it means undergoing a process that will essentially give you perfect recall of your parents' work. Their knowledge becomes yours. Their weapon becomes yours. Risks? The process has never been tested. It could work perfectly, or it could burn out your neural cortex and leave you a vegetable. 50-50 odds. According to our medical team. Fantastic, Murray said. She stood, pacing the small room. So my choices are become a lab rat or spend my life as a target. There's a third option, Quell said. We evacuate you to a secure location, maximum security, new identity, complete protection. A gilded cage. A life. Mara stopped pacing. Through the interrogation room's small window, she could see the Resolute's hangar bay. Technicians were working on fighters, running diagnostics, preparing for the next battle. Doing their jobs, fighting the war. Her parents had died fighting that war. How many others had fallen since? Do it, she said. Captain Chen, Krell began. I said do it. She turned to Veil. Activate the protocols. Make me the weapon. Veil studied her for a long moment. You understand there's no going back from this? If it works, you become humanity's living tactical archive. Every strategy your parents developed, every countermeasure, every weakness they discovered in the Thraxi, it all becomes part of you. You'll know things no single person should know. Better me than no one. The commander nodded slowly. Medical Bay, Deck 3. I'll have the team prep for immediate procedure. She headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think your parents would be proud. Mara didn't respond. Wasn't sure she could. The procedure took 3 hours and felt like drowning in fire. Mara lay on the medical bed, restraints holding her steady as neural interfaces fed data directly into her brain. It came in waves, tactical formations, weapons specifications, communication protocols, battle plans. Her parents' voices preserved in digital echoes, guiding her through complexities that would have taken years to learn naturally. And with the tactical data came memories. Her mother's laugh, her father's patient explanations. The last conversation they'd had before the shuttle that killed them. Except it hadn't been a shuttle accident. It had been a targeted strike, sabotage disguised as mechanical failure. She could see it now, crystal clear. The explosion, her parents knowing in their final seconds that they'd failed to complete their work, failed to protect her. The data surge hit critical mass. Mara screamed, her body arcing against the restraints. Alarms shrieked. Medical staff rushed forward. Commander Veil stood at the foot of the bed, her expression unreadable. Then silence. Mara opened her eyes. The room came into focus with startling clarity. She could see individual dust particles floating in the air, could hear the heartbeats of everyone present, could feel the thrumming of the Resolute's engines 3 decks below. Captain Chen? The doctor asked cautiously. Can you hear me? Yes. Her own voice sounded strange, layered somehow. I can hear everything. Veil stepped forward. Do you remember the activation? I remember all of it. Mara sat up, the restraints releasing automatically. My parents' research, every experiment, every failure, every breakthrough. She looked at her hands, seeing them as if for the first time. They weren't building a weapon. They were building me. Then it worked, Veil said. It worked. Mara slid off the medical bed, her movements precise and controlled. And I know how to kill the Thraxi, not just their fleet. All of them. Everywhere they're hiding. Every remnant, every survivor, every last trace. Admiral Krell had entered during the procedure. Now he looked at Mara with something approaching awe. How? My mother's communication protocols aren't just for listening to the Thraxi. They're for talking to them, for broadcasting directly into their hive network. Mara pulled up a holographic interface, her fingers moving with inhuman speed. My father's coordination algorithms can predict their response patterns with 98% accuracy. Combined, they create a cascade failure. We send a signal that their hive interprets as a critical threat, triggering defensive protocols. Those protocols conflict with their normal behavioral patterns, creating a logic loop. The loop spreads through the network like a virus. How long until they realize what's happening? Veil asked. They won't. The beauty of a logic loop is it disguises itself as legitimate commands. By the time they recognize the problem, it's already terminal. Mara brought up star charts, highlighting sectors. We've got maybe 48 hours before the Thoraxi regroup and attack again. We need to hit them first, hard and everywhere simultaneously. That's impossible, Krell said. We don't even know where all their forces are. I do. Mara's smile was cold and sharp. The attack on Kepler-9 wasn't just about eliminating me, it was reconnaissance. They pinged our defensive networks, mapped our response times, cataloged our capabilities, but communication goes both ways. While they were scanning us, I was scanning them. She pulled up new data, collected during the battle by systems she'd subconsciously accessed. Redact ship signatures, fleet positions, communication relays, a complete tactical picture. 17 remaining fleets, she said, spread across 12 systems, all of them in sectors the Concord abandoned during the wars. They've been rebuilding slowly and quietly, waiting for the right moment to strike. Vale was already on her communicator, relaying data to Central Command. This is real-time intelligence, updated as of 6 hours ago. Their coordination is still recovering from losing the node at Kepler-9. This is our window. Admiral Krell studied the star charts, his tactical mind clearly racing. Even with this intelligence, mobilizing forces for simultaneous strikes across 12 systems will take weeks. We don't have that kind of time. We don't need weeks, Mara said. We need one ship, one transmission. We broadcast the cascade signal from a central point, and it propagates through their entire network. Every Thoraxi vessel, every ground force, every hidden base, all of them receive the command simultaneously. One ship would never survive long enough to broadcast, Krell argued. Not a warship. They'd detect and destroy it before we got close enough. Mara turned to Vale. But a stealth insertion vessel, small enough to read as debris carrying minimal energy signatures? Vale's expression shifted to understanding. Like your unconventional warfare lecture. Exactly like that. We don't knock on the door, we ghost through it. The plan came together with shocking speed. Central Command, faced with the choice between a desperate gambit and waiting for the Thoraxi to strike first, chose desperation. Within 12 hours, a modified insertion craft designated Shadow 7 was being outfitted with the broadcast equipment Mara had specified. The crew selection was simpler. Mara herself, Commander Vale as tactical oversight, and a pilot named Rains who'd done more stealth runs than anyone else in the fleet. This is a suicide mission, Rains said flatly during the mission briefing. You understand that, right? We're jumping into a system with at least 3 Thoraxi capital ships, broadcasting a signal that'll make us light up like a beacon, and hoping we can transmit long enough before they vaporize us. Essentially, yes, Mara agreed. Just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. They launched 16 hours after the procedure, Shadow 7 slipping out of the Resolute's hangar bay like a whisper. The destination was the Krell Nebula, a dense gas cloud that sensors suggested housed the largest concentration of Thoraxi forces. The jump to hyperspace was smooth, the 3 hours of transit, less so. Mara spent the time fine-tuning the broadcast protocols, checking and rechecking every line of code. One mistake, one misaligned frequency, and the cascade would fail. You're going to wear out the console, Vale observed from her station. I'm going to wear out me if I don't stay busy, Mara replied. Easier to focus on the technical details than the fact that we're probably going to die. Probably? I'm an optimist. Vale actually smiled at that. Your parents would definitely be proud. The words hit harder than Mara expected. She paused in her work, staring at her reflection in the console's dark screen. I wish I could ask them if this is what they wanted. If turning me into a living weapon was really their plan, or if I'm just fulfilling someone else's interpretation of their research. Does it matter? Continue 30 dis. Vale asked. You're here. The weapon exists. Whether your parents intended it or not. The question isn't what they wanted. It's what you want. Mara considered that. I want the Thoraxi to pay for every life they've taken, every world they've consumed, every family they've destroyed. I want them to know that humanity doesn't forgive, and we sure as hell don't forget. Then I'd say you're exactly where you need to be. Shadow 7 dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Krell Nebula. The sensors immediately lit up with contacts. Dozens of Thoraxi vessels, ranging from small patrol craft to massive dreadnoughts. They moved through the gas clouds like predators, their formations precise and deadly. Starting our approach, Rain said. cutting all non-essential power, were going dark. The insertion craft systems shut down one by one until they were running on minimal life support and navigation. On the sensors, Shadow 7's signature faded to almost nothing, just another piece of debris floating in the nebula. They drifted for 20 minutes, following a calculated trajectory that would bring them within broadcast range of the Thraxi command vessel. Mara could see it on passive sensors, a monstrosity of organic and mechanical components easily 5 kilometers long. The fleet's central node, range in 3 minutes, Rain said. We'll have maybe 30 seconds of transmission time before they locate and target us. 30 seconds is plenty, Mara said. Her finger hovered over the broadcast activation. Vale, any last-minute wisdom? Don't miss. The minutes crawled past. Shadow 7 continued its silent drift, a ghost among titans. The Thraxi vessels moved around them, oblivious to the threat in their midst. Range, Rains announced. You're live. Mara activated the broadcast. The cascade signal punched out in all directions, a complex wave of data that infiltrated the Thraxi network like a virus. Her heart beat. Nothing happened. Then the command vessel's running lights flickered. Once, twice, on sensors. Every Thraxi ship in the nebula simultaneously stopped moving. It's working, Vale whispered. The cascade spread through the network across the fleets into every vessel and soldier connected to the hive. Logic loops formed, defensive protocols conflicting with behavioral programming. The Thraxi network began to devour itself from within. Alarms shrieked as weapons locks painted Shadow 7. The command vessel had finally noticed them, its massive guns rotating to target their position. Transmission complete, Mara announced. Rains, get us out of here. The pilot didn't need to be told twice. Shadow 7's engines flared to life, burning hard for the edge of the nebula. Behind them the command vessel fired, its particle beam slicing through space where they'd been half a second earlier. But the shot was slow, uncoordinated. The cascade was already affecting their targeting systems. Jump in 30 seconds, Rain said. More weapons fire. The nebula lit up as the Thraxi vessels began firing randomly, their targeting computers corrupted by the cascade. Some shot at Shadow 7, others targeted each other. Chaos consumed the fleet. 10 seconds. A dreadnought exploded as its own weapons systems misfired, the cascade turning it into a bomb. The shockwave buffeted Shadow 7, sending them into a spin. 5 seconds. Hold on. Reality twisted. Hyperspace claimed them, yanking Shadow 7 out of the nebula just as the command vessel's second shot vaporized the space they'd occupied. They emerged 6 light-years away, sensors immediately sweeping for pursuit. Nothing. They'd escaped. Status of the cascade? Vale asked. Mara checked her instruments. Propagating through their network as designed, by now it's reached every Thraxi vessel connected to the hive. They're all experiencing the same cascade failure. So we won? We won. The confirmation came 3 hours later from Concord fleets across known space. The Thraxi vessels were powering down. Ground forces were becoming uncoordinated. The hive network that had made them so deadly was tearing itself apart. Within 12 hours, it was over. The Thraxi threat, resurrected from extinction, had been returned to it, this time permanently. Mara stood in the observation deck of the Resolute, watching as the last confirmed Thraxi vessel was destroyed by a Concord patrol. It was a small ship, barely armed, its crew already dead from cascade-induced system failures. How does it feel? Admiral Krell asked, joining her at the window. Ending a war your parents started, completing their work, Mara corrected. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about all the lives they saved. All the worlds that won't be harvested. The families that won't be torn apart. It doesn't bring my parents back, but maybe it gives their deaths meaning. More than meaning. Legacy. Krell handed her a datapad. Central Command has questions about you, your capabilities. What else might be locked in your neural architecture? I'm not a weapon they can just point at the next threat, Mara said firmly. I know, but you're also not just a student anymore. He gestured to the datapad. Orders promoting you to commander, assignment to intelligence division. Vale requested you specifically for her tactical analysis team. Mara read through the orders, a small smile forming. They want me to teach unconventional warfare. Seems appropriate. You did just prove your lecture correct in the most dramatic way possible. She looked back out the window, watching ships move through the darkness. Somewhere out there, students at military academies across the Concord were learning tactics from textbooks, following established protocols, doing things the way they'd been done. And somewhere, inevitably, the next threat would emerge. The next enemy that couldn't be beaten by conventional means. "Tell Commander Vale I accept," Mara said, "on one condition, which is, when I teach warfare, I do it my way. No sanitized lectures, no safe theories. I teach people how to actually survive when the universe stops playing fair." Krell's expression suggested he'd expected nothing less. "Done. Welcome to Intelligence Division, Commander Chen." 3 months later, Mara stood in front of a lecture hall remarkably similar to the one on Kepler-Nine. Different station, different students, same eternal truth, young cadets who thought they knew war because they'd studied it. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Commander Chen, and this is Advanced Tactical Theory. Before we begin, I want you to understand something. Everything you've learned up to this point, every battle plan and strategic doctrine, is useless if you're not willing to throw it away when the situation demands it." Hands went up, questions formed. Mara ignored them. 3 months ago, I was sitting where you are. Then an extinct species attacked my academy, and I had to choose between following protocol and staying alive. I chose life. I chose tactics that weren't in any manual. And because of that choice, everyone in this room is safe from a threat you didn't even know existed. She pulled up a holographic display showing the Battle of Kepler-Nine. "This is what real warfare looks like. Not clean, not heroic, just desperate people making impossible choices and hoping they're fast enough, smart enough, and ruthless enough to see the next sunrise." A cadet in the front row raised her hand. "Ma'am, are you saying we should ignore our training?" "I'm saying your training is a starting point, not a finish line. The enemy doesn't care about your doctrine. They care about winning. So you need to be willing to rewrite the rules, exploit every advantage, and never ever assume that the way things have always been done is the way they should be done." Mara smiled, and it was the same cold, sharp expression she'd worn in that command center months ago. "Now then, let's talk about unconventional warfare. Starting with a question. When your enemy has you outgunned, outnumbered, and completely surrounded, what's the one thing they're not expecting?" She waited, watching young minds race for answers. "The correct response is simple. They're not expecting you to attack, so that's exactly what you do." The lecture hall was silent. Then someone started taking notes. Then another. Then the whole class. Realizing they weren't here for theory, they were here to learn how to win wars that couldn't be won. Mara Chen, weapon forged from grief and necessity, began to teach them how her parents' legacy carried forward in tactics that would reshape galactic warfare, not through brute force or superior technology, but through the one advantage humanity had always possessed: the willingness to fight dirty when survival demanded it. Outside the lecture hall windows, stars burned in the endless dark, each one a world a potential battlefield. And standing between them and annihilation, one human woman who'd learned that sometimes the best way to honor the dead was to make damn sure no one else joined them. Class was in session, and the galaxy would never be the same.